So hello and welcome to this session on innovation frameworks for digital transformation. I'm Jens Bedin and I'm standing here in a studio in Gothenburg together with Victoria van Kamp. And to kick off though, we will start immediately by going up to Stockholm and visit Sandvik Code's offices where we have Hugo Nordell and my colleague Robin Sparrefors. Sandvik is a 100 billion SEK global company with its headquarters here in Sweden. It has businesses across several areas, including mining, advanced materials, additive manufacturing, and machining. And to scale its digital footprint, they started a Center of Digital Excellence, or CODE, in 2017, where Hugo Nordell was the second employee. Hugo was recruited from Silicon Valley, where he had been a successful entrepreneur with 2 startup exits behind him. Now he was to do the same kind of job, but within a large corporate to reap the benefits of digital manufacturing. Today, Hugo is the VP of Strategy at Sandvik Digital. So Hugo, will you start by briefly introducing the main business drivers behind the CODE initiative and give us an example of what you have created?
Thanks, Jens. Yeah, so there are 2 strategic imperatives for why we created Sandvik Code. And before I walk through them, let's provide some market context. So manufacturing productivity growth is at an all-time low, and upwards of 30% of skilled manufacturing labor is approaching retirement. So in order to understand where the next phase of productivity growth will have to come from, we started by breaking down our customers' cost structure. And it turns out that tooling is less than 5% of costs, but has a direct impact on 90% of the customer's total cost base. Now, historically, we've driven productivity improvement by sending our engineers on site to work across the full factory floor, but we charged for the tooling, and the economics of this approach requires large tooling contracts. But 75% of global tool spend is actually driven by customers with fewer than 50 employees who can't afford this high touch model. And so therefore, the first imperative for us became to tap into this long tail of small customers and help them secure business continuity. But on top of this, we're also seeing that key manufacturing decisions are moving upstream, away from our home on the production floor and into software used in an engineering office by an entirely different set of stakeholders. So to remain relevant with our customers, our second imperative has been to secure our position upstream where these decisions are moving. And with these imperatives in mind, it's evident that we need to find new ways of making our know-how reproducible and more easily accessible to customers. And the first product that leverages these insights is called Prism. Prism is a programming application that dramatically simplifies the way that metal cutting machines are programmed, using codified Sandvik knowledge made available on demand with the tap of a finger. Prism reduces programming time by up to 90% and productivity increases by up to 20%. And anyone can use it, novices and experts alike, to move production forward.
Very impressive. So Hugo, can you elaborate a bit more on the playbook that you use to make this happen?
Sure. So in terms of a playbook for navigating the digital change in practice, we started with the following question. What do we bring to the table? Now, if you can't articulate this, you won't know where to start or what the metrics of success will be. And second, map the value chain, identify bottlenecks, and evaluate which positions in the value chain are key for your core competence to make things better. And third, estimate the value potential from these positions in order to understand how big the opportunity is, who else is eyeing it, and if it's big enough for you to move the needle.
Robin, you were working alongside Hugo on the strategic positioning part. Can you briefly explain what you did?
Sure. Once you're reasonably clear on the value you want to target and the positions in the value chain you want, you need to translate that from the value throughout the technology stack and ultimately bring your plans to reality. In Sandvik's case, you went beyond a connected product and a proprietary IoT solution to creating a platform that enabled participation from a whole ecosystem. And that meant balancing openness and control. You needed to build a well-functioning software stack that was also inclusive to engage the whole ecosystem, as well as sufficient control around key positions to get the desired roles and to capture the right share of the value pool. In more detail, it was about creating a red thread of competitiveness vectors from the value throughout the technology stack. Together, we identified the key technologies, set the innovation path, and decided on the best way to buy, build, or partner to develop the needed technologies, and added a control strategy layer to regulate exclusivity and openness using available tools such as patents, secrecy, and contracts. The control strategy served to ensure freedom to act with a portfolio aimed at deterring actions against Sandvik as well as against the ecosystem at large. It also served to ensure differentiation, to build reputation, and to secure relationships. By protecting key elements in relation to competing platforms, Sandvik demonstrated its ambition to lead and its commitment to the long-term success of the ecosystem.
So, with strategy, positioning, and relevant business goals in place, this begs the question, where do you start? Now, I fundamentally believe that your team has to be in-house, and it must include domain experts and digital outsiders in order to maximize the likelihood that what you build, customers are willing to pay for. Start small with this core of domain and digital talent, and amplify as necessary with external partners to achieve speed. And second, as you increasingly validate the opportunity and you shape the offering, your team must be allowed to grow to truly have a chance at maximizing positive impact. And finally, it pays to start small, but you will need to grow your digital investments over time in order to drive meaningful business outcome. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Hugo and Robin, for a great case presentation, which I think provided some very useful insights into what digital technology innovation can look like and how IP can have a decisive role to play in its successful deployment. As I said, I'm sitting here in Gothenburg together with Victoria van Kamp. And in Munich, we have Sven Schuwirt from Audi and Anna Kopp from Microsoft. But before we start the actual panel discussion, I will just show you a few introductory slides to set the frame. So if I try to summarize what digitalization means to a lot of companies right now, it is the move from being a provider of things to tapping into the value enabled by multi-stakeholder ecosystems, which are built on connectivity, big data, and advanced analytics, or AI. However, this also means a radically different scope of technology and innovation, which means that typically the unique domain knowledge of each company must be translated into contributions to the digital stack on top of the traditional product. This is a journey where different companies have incentives to go different lengths, both in terms of business model and in terms of the technology stack. For some, it is enough to build their own independent, single-use case digital solutions, while for others, like in the case of Sandvik Code that we just saw, the real value is unlocked only if you're able to connect the whole value chain so that know-how and data is available at the right place for the right stakeholder at the right time. If this is done successfully, it means that you can create a value pool that is much larger than the sum of the different parts for the whole ecosystem to share. Different players have different drivers for engaging in industrial digital ecosystems. And highly simplified, you have three different categories of players here. You have the industrial manufacturers, or the OEMs, where you have the market expecting digital products and services, as well as productivity improvements and reduced costs. You have the industrial machinery providers, who of course also want to reap the benefits of digital, but who also must sort of avoid becoming providers of commodities. And finally, you have the platform capability providers who want to scale their agnostic digital platforms across different industry verticals. So with the introduction I did, it's time to jump into the discussion. And I'm turning my first question directly to you, Victoria. Why is digital technology important to SKF? And what are the jobs that you solve for your customers by digitalizing products and services?
Well, let me first say what cannot be digitalized is the actual ball bearing. They will still be made of steel, I promise you. But for us, digital enables a shift of business model. We realized some years ago that our customers would prefer to not buy any new bearings. If you have an Audi, yes, you have bearings in it from the beginning, but you don't want to buy any new ones because it means something broke down. If you have a paper mill, you actually don't want the machines to break down. Now, when you realize that, you want machines to keep running. But how to do that without having massive amounts of data, you don't really know. It becomes a bit of trial and error. So digital data, collecting data, analyzing data, creating insights, and then acting. This is all enabled by digital. But it is not that we are selling digital or something like that. This is really digital as a tool to do something good for our customers.
Perfect. And if we turn to you, Sven, why is digital technology important to Audi? What are the jobs that you solve for your customers?
Pretty much the same answer in the Audi case. I mean, we do see digitalization as one of the core enablers for future business model. Just coming from a customer's perspective, what we plan to do is to simply digitalize the entire customer journey from what we call I consider an Audi or service to I choose, I buy an Audi and I use and hopefully later on reconsider it. Therefore, what we are working on jointly together with Volkswagen Group as well as our suppliers on ending up with a platform based on data access all across the three different distribution levels, OEM side, importer side and retail side, which is a very complex business model currently. And therefore, we try to simply optimize our core business, secure our core business, and exploit new business potentials based on digitalization as well as on electrification.
Very good. And if we go to you, Anna, I mean, everybody knows the vast capabilities of Microsoft, and I know you can show me endless slides on your different software suites and so on. But if we instead go down to the people level, can you give me some examples of what you are ultimately enabling for people?
Yeah, my people are at the core, and I would say for people as such, it's possibilities, and for companies, it's an executive edge. And I'll explain what I mean with that. There used to be a time you hired the people that were in your location, in your geolocation, or who was prepared to move where you was so that they could work in a team on anything from operations, innovation, and so on. Now, because you can work from anywhere, you hire the best people for your project from anywhere in the world. And you can even, because you're doing that and getting the best people, you can also mix it up and set up new projects with different mixes of people, because you're no longer bound to being in one place. And I remember these times. I mean, it's not that many years ago. But when it comes also to companies and the competitive edge, now let's talk about calendars. You've got a full calendar? I've got a full calendar, yeah. So if someone comes to me and says, let's brainstorm, all right, let's look in my calendar. When can we get together? There used to be a time you traveled, you needed a whiteboard, and you needed to, a certain setup to be able to brainstorm creatively. So in 4, 5, 6 weeks was probably the first time that you could get people from all over the world to get together in one spot because the calendars were full. But now that you can do that over, through digitalization in the cloud and with the collaboration tools we have, you can move pretty fast. You can probably get a meeting by Thursday. And because of that, projects move faster. You get acceleration. And that gives you the competitive edge to move much faster. So getting the right people for your teams, getting great jobs out there for great people, and moving your business forward.
Very good and very interesting. And I know that a lot of companies have sort of used a lot of these benefits, not least now during sort of the COVID times, for example, SKF.
Sure.
Victoria, can you give us a more sort of concrete example of how digitalization has changed or sort of expanded your value propositions to your customers?
Well, a very clear example is a paper mill. A paper mill, there is pulp coming in or chips coming in at one end and paper coming out at the other end. And in between, there are something like 600 bearings or shafts spinning. And if one single one of those breaks or stops or overheats, there is no paper coming out on the other side. And an unplanned stop, as that is called, costs millions for the paper mill. And there are customers in the other end who get upset as well, so maybe choose somebody else. So SKF, for example, works with Billerud-Korsnäs, which is a Swedish big pulp and paper producing company, and we help them with keeping their machines running. So instead of the old way of thinking about this, we would have been very quick to sell them a new bearing if something overheats, and maybe even we would have gone there and helped them to mount it, and we would have sold them some sensors that were checking the health of them. But that is all good and well, but it actually puts the responsibility on the Billerud-Korsnäs. So a switch in this business model is to say, let SKF, let's make you responsible. Let's pay SKF if the paper mill runs, not when it stops, which actually the old model was. So switching using digital, because this is not possible without digital tools, we actually can help the customer in a way that is better for us, better for them, and I think we will come to that, better for the environment as well.
So in a sense, we can say that you're also then aligning your interest with the customer's interest. That's a main part of it.
Exactly, because in the past, we would have earned money when something broke down. That's not aligned interest. That's actually counterproductive. So now, when it runs, we will earn something. The customer does. So both of us are happy. Now, of course, then we need to get paid in a different way, in a fee-based or subscription-based way instead of per kilo round product.
Yeah. If we jump over to Munich and to Audi, Sven, can you give us a concrete example of how you are right now sort of changing your value proposition to customers?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just jumping back or flipping back a couple of years ago, our business model is quite traditional. I mean, we spend a hell lot of efforts in developing, producing and selling a car, mainly on a lease contract with 3 years duration. Within the 3 years, we normally do stay in contact with a customer just once a year with a normal standard service request. So based on digitalization, we right now have for the first time the opportunity to stay in contact with a customer on a continuous level, like 24/7. And just previously, a couple of weeks ago, we launched a new service called Function on Demand. So via your app, we simply offer the customer to unlock the software, like on your smartphone, to get an app installed in your car with new additional functions. So that's a completely new business model for us as being an OEM, including the importer and retail level. That's one example. A second example, coming back to our core business service. I know that there are many intermediates which try to attack our core business like service, which is one big pillar of our business model. So based on the data we do have, the tracking data, for sure, everything GDPR compliant, based on the consent of a customer, we simply send out the service request right to your preferred dealer on your app, including all the data of the car. So the workshop on the other side, on retail level, gets somehow prepared to service you on an even better level, and including everything which is needed, like a courtesy car. So these are just two concrete examples how we try to simply, on one side, optimize our and secure our core business, and on the other side, exploit new business potentials on the downstream level.
And I presume if we talk about sort of this function on demand, and we talk about that in the context then of digital, that means, I presume, also that that is very important that you're able to do sort of over-the-air updates and sort of that kinds of capabilities to actually enable the cars to have different function based on sort of what the customer wants, based on what they click on the cell phones, as far as I understand.
Yes, you're right. So over-the-air update, by the way, is something which becomes standard. Function on demand, it's something where we offer you additional functionalities where hopefully the customer is also willing to pay an extra amount of money. Like you know it again from your smartphone, on a daily basis, a flat rate basis, whatever, completely new business models. And therefore what we do need to have in place is an entirely new ecosystem. So it's no more just a physical product, it's becoming a completely digital product. And the good thing is, when it comes to complexity in the hardware in the car, we can reduce complexity by far. So it's a little bit like the Ford approach more than 100 years ago. Every car hopefully becomes more or less reduced in terms of complexity, and the rest is simply done. Differentiation is done by software.
Yep. Very, very interesting development. So Victoria, you mentioned before that if we go sort of all the way with digitalization, we could be designing sort of, as I understand it, essentially machines for eternal use, which of course sounds fantastic from a sustainability perspective. Can you go deeper into what that actually means, or sort of what that looks like?
I stay with my paper machine example here. You can think of the actual frame of many paper machines. There's from the 60s already, but so they're 50 years old, but they're being upgraded, and that is a great thing from a sustainability point of view. And if we now can keep collecting data from the process, like temperature of this shaft, speed of that shaft, load on this support beam over here. If we have all that data and we take it in to an AI processing engine, because it is way too much data for a human being, we can see 3-4 things and find a pattern. But now we start talking about thousands of data points. If we have that, then we can actually start looking into the future, because somewhere the AI will see, oh, last time that the support beam broke, it was 3 months before they run a couple of big logs through there. So the risk is now high that it breaks again because it's so and so long time since it was serviced. So patterns like that enables us to look into the future. So now we, based on the AI's recommendation, can make changes of spare parts or bits and pieces of the paper machine months before anything actually happens. And this, in the end, we can also, of course, we can do, I forgot to say that, we can make upgrades, because if we change something in the 10 years ago, maybe the technology moved on since then, so we can put in products with new seals, with ceramic materials, with surface coatings. So you actually get an upgrade when you service the machine. And this, let's say forever is a very long word and very long time, but we should be able to have machinery that runs really until things truly start cracking. Yeah.
Very good. So Sven, I know that also Audi, of course, is working a lot with sustainability, and that sustainability is, a core part of your corporate strategy. Can you give us some perspectives of the main impacts from digital technology on sustainability for your business?
Yeah, for sure. As you said, sustainability is one of the core pillars. We are fully committed as one of the first OEMs for the Paris climate conditional objectives. So, concrete example, no electrification without digitalization. What do I mean? If you do drive or use an electric car, you need to have what we call a route planner for your charging services. That's a digital service, that's a digital product. Second example is a very old one, is navigation system to at least offer you the optimized, most efficient route. Third example is autonomous driving and all driving assistance systems, which definitely reduce the number of accidents and therefore also the carbon footprint. And the fourth little example is one in the Scandinavian region. We take over data from our cars and put them on a platform and offer that data access on a real-time data map for the winter service. Simply to reduce the efforts in terms of trucks for the winter service when we sprinkle the salt only to the roads where it's needed. Because we can track it in real time where are icy conditions and where is the street just a normal condition and no ice is no salt is needed. So that's a good example also how we can use data for the story of sustainability.
So extremely much increased efficiency, you can say, in very many different regards. So Victoria, what is stopping us from reaching the scenario you just described already today? I mean, I would presume that most of the technology for this is essentially already available.
It is, and it is. You can definitely do this today. The challenge is that even if, sure, bearings are very important, but they're not the only thing in the world. So in order to make this machine that runs forever, we need to be part of an ecosystem. We need to work with other big players. It can be mechanical players like ABB or Siemens. It can be Voith for the machine. It can be Chinese players for compressors or pumps. And this now, so what I'm describing here is an ecosystem, a real ecosystem with real players that need to share data with each other. And we need to draw conclusions based on each other's data. And at some point, somebody, one of us or several of us, need to get together and actually solve the problem for the customer. And right now, very often we get stuck in theoretical discussions on who would take what part of the cake before we actually even baked the cake. So I would say there are some good attempts, but and that is where the end users, like the paper mills of this world, where they step up and say, hey, I want you guys to work together. Then it happens. So I think there is some light in that in this.
Yeah. So really sort of one key part, as far as I understand what you're saying, is that sort of aligning the business incentives across these players in the ecosystem is a very sort of hard nut to crack.
It is. The financial side, but also who owns what, let's say, data or the insights that you draw. So if you get data from 5 different sources and you get something new, who owns that new information? That's not so easy.
So Sven, you are the Vorsprung durch Technik company with obviously a very proud innovation history. Has Audi shifted? I mean, have you shifted your perspective on how to partner and how to collaborate if you look sort of 10 years back and then look at sort of where you are today?
If I take Victoria's example of the cake, yes, definitely yes. I think we cannot handle or cook the cake on our own. We need to have partners like Microsoft, everyone. So maybe some parts of the cake have to remain as a truly 100% Audi cake. Like for instance, the customer interface, because we believe that we should try to own or at least be the interface towards the customer. But to have a really beautiful and tasteful cake, we definitely need to have some more ingredients than only Audi or Volkswagen Group ingredients, like for instance a cloud. We don't have any cloud platform, so we have to go to partners like for instance Microsoft and use them and collaborate with them. So the game for the future, and it has already started, is collaboration between partners and collaboration also in our ecosystem when it comes to headquarter, including the markets, collaboration with our importers. There are many free importers, not owned importers, our dealers. So what we need to do is like one recipe, a joint recipe with different ingredients, and that's more or less the story of a cake of the future.
So in the end, business comes down to money, and at Audi, I mean, as far as I understand, you're making it easier to buy a car. It can be highly personalized. In a couple of years, it will hopefully drive itself and free up, if I remember correctly, Sven, some 90 minutes per day for the driver. Yeah. It can be used for other purposes instead of being parked, etc. If we look at all these different features, are they just sort of tickets to play on the market, or how will you in the end make money from all of these different changes?
Oh, that's a big question. I could easily say if everything comes true what you just mentioned, it's time to retire for me. No, honestly, I think it's both. On one side, it's a ticket to remain on the ground and to be remain relevant for our customers. And on the other side, if we manage to build up such an ecosystem, and it should be an open one, it's time to integrate any kind of verticals in the downstream, and then it's time to end up with a new business model. So it's revenue sharing. I give you one example, HoloRide. So that immersive VR experience, they are developing their own platform, their content platform, but we need to get access down to our cars. We offer them the access, and from their revenues, we get X% into our pockets. That's the future game, and for sure there will be a hell lot of services for free, because the customer simply is no more willing to pay any additional amount of money for standard things like whatever, an access to a map. A map in future is only a foundation. Based on the data you have, and you mix it and enrich the data, then you end up with additional, hopefully value-driven services and functionalities. Again, impossible to do it on our own as Audi. Therefore, we just invented the so-called car software organization. That's a new group entity, but that's only, again, one piece of the cake. And secondly, it's again finding the right partners to develop a monster, a beautiful cake.
Great. So Anna, I know now that Audi is not using Microsoft as a cloud provider, etc. But presume they were, and sure. Presume that Microsoft was providing analytics capability, etc., to enable some of the use cases that we just talked about. What is your business model? How are you making money in that kind of context?
Well, I just heard my colleague here say that's not true.
I think there is a cloud already in place together with Microsoft.
Okay.
Nice to hear from me. Okay. So, yeah, thank you. Didn't want to let that stand here. As I just said, is the business model is primarily here software, and there's this the applications that we provide, of course, but also the cloud, which is the one thing that allows the digital transformation worldwide, everything that we're doing, because it starts already not just with the car, it starts with the employees, it starts with the innovation, the people that are working in the offices at our customers. So of course, without that, the collaboration and the transformation wouldn't be happening. And then when you're asking how we would earn money, I mean, mostly it's a subscription model, and there is a big stack. So I'm not going to go through here the Microsoft product list, but most of them are known anyway. But the key features that we're seeing in this space now, to mention something new, is, for example, IoT and AI. IoT, there's something we call digital twins, which is a quite exciting ecosystem platform on Azure to drive IoT. You can make models of anything from a car to a building to a city, and then run analytics over it to see what it is that you want to do with it. It can be things like security, building, and also entertainment. So those are additional services that we provide. And I think AI is needs to be mentioned. It's a data question, and there's a lot of data currently out and about. And you need that to be able to provide AI. And we provide the software to do all those analytics and to display them in BI systems, for example.
So essentially, one can say that if your partners are making money, you are making money.
Yes, and and that's the thing. I mean, the partnerships, we see tremendous potential, But if we, and you asked before on the proprietary part as well, if we don't partner and make sure that it's as open as possible, we are limiting each other. So, because if you have very strict proprietary systems, it is going to narrow the innovation that you can drive with it. And that's why partnership is the A and O. That's what really makes this thrive.
Yeah. So Victoria, if we're designing these eternal machines with reused oil, which you forgot to mention before, but which is a huge thing, you have no need for spare parts, etc. Aren't we killing your business then? Or how will you make money?
Well, I am hoping that next time I talk to Sven from Audi, that I could actually have a business model where I get paid for the number of revolutions that those bearings in the wheels or engine are doing, because that would make me do my utmost to create this product that was never ever gonna fail. And when the Audis are, I assume, also gonna last for a long time and used while I'm working, my Audi is out running errands or whatever they do. That means that the demands on uptime also for a car is gonna be much higher. I don't think anybody really wants to have their car serviced. And the same will be even more true in the future. So our approach here is to go to the fee-based business. We had our Capital Market Day a couple of weeks ago, where we announced that we have about 1 billion SEK today annually in sales of fee-based business. This is what I'm describing. That's about 20% of our sales to pulp and paper. So it's actually significant. But we are going to grow this so that becomes the main share of what we are doing. And we will be a bearing producer, absolutely.
Really interesting development, of course. Sven, and maybe you already sort of answered this to some extent, but I presume you could decide at Audi to just be an assembler of hardware and essentially let your cars become a kind of a, PC on wheels, and then let other players provide all this essential software, the services, and so on. But as far as I can tell, with car software org and so on, this is not what you're doing. Why is that?
It's definitely not what we are doing and what's our plan. Why? Simple answer. Once we just become a hardware supplier, we lose the contact to our customer, and we lose the interface to our customer, and therefore probably also the power and the control over the conditions like pricing and volume. So then our business model is probably completely destroyed, yeah. And people on the other side, the users, the customers, are expecting an Audi experience, a real experience, and experience is not only hardware. Experience is software, hardware, services, and people. Don't forget the people. Everything.
So this takes us to the question of competitiveness, because obviously that's sort of what it comes down to here. And we have concluded that the stack on top of the core product is obviously very important, and how that means that we need to shift innovation also into that part of the stack. But what will then be your most important assets moving forward? Sort of how do you create a competitive edge there? If I look at the SKF, what is it that you have sort of to compete there?
We have two things actually. We decided last year to acquire an AI company, and not just any AI, because there are many different ones, but one in Israel that was working exactly in the space we were. The reason we did that was that we are firm believers that our application knowledge and knowledge about car corners or paper machines or whatnot is so crucial that if we let that go into anybody else's AI engine, we lose our core intellectual asset. So our two things is the artificial intelligence that we are enriching with our 113-year-old application knowledge. And that will help us to produce the right products, to whatever, sensorize them in the right way. But without that, we're going to be lost.
Yeah. And I think that also sort of is very much in line with, if we look at the Sandvik case, what Hugo showed was this picture where he had, domain knowledge or their core competence combined with sort of the digital competence, essentially sort of translating the core competence, your market position, all that into sort of contributions to the digital stack.
And if I say one more thing, we do hand movements transforming. I can tell you, here is the difficult part.
Yeah.
We're in the race.
Great. So Anna, competitiveness seems to increasingly come from software and certain sort of key components of the stack, as well as not least conclusions and patterns drawn from the key data or insights, as Victoria said before. And this is obviously the home turf for Microsoft. So, and which means that it could make you dangerous. So how do you make your partners trust that they are not working with a wolf dressed in sheep's clothing?
Very straightforward answer on that. We do not monetize our customers' data. We have a very clear view on that the data, our customers' data, belongs to our customers. Short and sweet as that. I mean, there's always laws and GDPR, you mentioned it, we have to stick to, but in the end, that is the position that we have taken, and that's what we're doing.
And I guess that also comes down to what we discussed before about sort of finding ways of aligning business incentives between the different partners to build this stack where everybody's making money, but where nobody's feeling that they are sort of unfairly abused by someone else. Okay, Sven, if we take the same question for you, what will Forsprung Durchteknik mean in the future? What will be the key sources of competitiveness for a company like Audi?
Still, one part will remain the car because it's not a product for just 10 euros. It's an investment product for a couple of thousands of euros. So design definitely in the hardware. The engine, the transmission concept, for sure electrification, the overall appearance, and plus, that's the old word, and additionally relevant service, just focusing on the relevant service for a customer. Not everything which is technically possible, but simply focusing on what is really relevant for our premium customer. All in all, coming back to the cake, it should be a premium cake, a beautiful one where people are willing to pay a price premium for it. It's not a standard cake.
If I remember correctly, when I was reading about the car software organization, you said that you were going to move from sort of something like 10% of the software stack to 60% of the stack in 2025. Is that roughly correct?
Yes, that's the overall objective, and it's a very ambitious one for an automotive OEM. Yeah. Don't forget where we do come from, but I think we are on the right track, simply in terms of developing our own OS operating system for the entire Volkswagen Group, including all the different brands, more than 10 brands, more than 50% market share within Europe. I would honestly say that's also my personal motivation. If not Volkswagen Group, who else on the planet within the automotive industry can end up with such a platform approach? Yeah, again, including our partners and the right ones.
Fascinating. So we take sort of a little bit of a detour here. I remember one of my first visits to SKF in 2007 and how I was introduced to this CARB, I think it's compact aligning roller bearings, as a result of SKF's leading edge innovation. But if we look at what we are discussing today, most of the conversation is directed to this sort of stack on top of the sort of core product. What does that mean for you as the top technology executive in a company like SKF?
Well, it is actually the car bearing and other innovation around the product is actually still a core foundation. But I would see it more as we add to that something that can tell us or help us with innovating in the right direction. In the past, it was a couple of smart guys, usually, that invented the next bearing, and it became the big thing. But now we do need to have those products that last forever or that can be upgraded. The insights how or what to do comes from new sensors, new streams of data, artificial intelligence. And my challenge as Chief Technology Officer, I need my great engineers all over the company, and I need them to be proud and keep innovating. And I do that by talking about our customers and what they need and where they want to go.
Mm-hmm. And are you able to sort of refocus their mind on sort of the future and to see all these new opportunities, or is it a lot of sort of inertia? I mean, people trying to sort of stick with what you've always been doing, or sort of
there is of course a pride of the past and nostalgia.
Should be.
And I try exactly. We're very proud of our history, but the key thing is to expose engineers to customers and to customers that are in the frontier, and to listen to people like Sven, who talks about where the car industry is going. That makes a big impact on our engineers.
So now we have been talking, a lot about building new business and joint technology stacks and data together with multiple partners or ecosystems where we must build trust and clear rules. We want to have balanced business incentives. We want to combine proprietary solutions with openness, combine tough competition with collaboration, and so on. There's a lot of sort of different components here. What role do you think intellectual property has to play in making all this work? And I think I'll turn to you first, Sven. Sort of, what's your perspective on that?
Very simple answer. We do see VIP as whatever foundation, or what I would call it a center of gravity of that new collaboration model between the different partners. Easy like this, but it's not easy. But it's that little piece of paper, all the rules, our guidelines, the revenue potentials, the revenue split, the business model, everything is written down. Yeah, IP is again the core of everything in the future.
Because I've obviously worked a lot with this, and one big shift that I see is that many companies have in the past been using IP primarily to sort of block and protect, but now we seem to be moving much more into a more, let's say, transactional environment where you're using IP to collaborate, to sort of set the rules, to make sure that you have fairness and that you can guarantee openness, but also guarantee sort of proprietariness in certain layers. Like you said before, Sven, the interface to the customer is really key to Audi, but still you want to have openness on other layers below, so that you're able to sort of innovate and collaborate together with other partners. What's your view, Victoria, on IP? Sort of how do you see that in this context?
Well, I have a little bit unorthodox. I work a lot with China, and I have done so for most of my career. And I know all the challenges there are working with China, but certainly one great thing of my Chinese colleagues and customers is that they're fast. And if I sit and worry too much about intellectual property and procedures for that, I will lose out to somebody who is faster than I am. And then in our company, we used to be extremely careful. We still are. We are careful. We have defined what our crown jewels are, and we won't let those go. But the crown jewels are less than they were in the past. So we try to really limit it, and then try to be fast in collaboration with customers, because we think that's the best protection actually for us.
And I guess that takes us also to the question that sort of what IP is in this context. I mean, it's one part is patents, but then of course it's partly secrecy, but it's also a lot about contracts and sort of, doing what you said before, agreeing upon sort of who should own what kind of data and, what kind of access that you should have. But it's also a lot about open source, as far as I can tell. I mean, I think it's coming in more and more, at least sort of among a lot of companies that we are working with. Open source sort of maybe used to be something where you just decided, we had a policy and this is allowed, this is not allowed. But now it seems to coming in much more into sort of this dialogue between business, technology, legal, to some extent, sort of IP. I don't know if you have any of those sort of experiences so far.
We are quite careful with open source, because we feel that with our brand, it doesn't matter whose fault it was. When something goes haywire, one of those 600 bearings or one of those 6,000 sensors is open because of us, we can't blame, we used open source to be fair. So our challenge here is quality assurance and cybersecurity, and we take that extremely seriously.
So Anna, I know that you have some perspectives on this, where of course with digitalization, software use is skyrocketing, and at the same time, as I said, my impression is that at least among some of our clients, the relative share of the stack which is open source is gradually increasing. What are the pros and cons of that, and is this something you believe companies are able to manage, or isn't it a problem at all, or what's your view on that?
Yeah, Victoria said it really well. It's cybersecurity, privacy. There are certain things that are non-negotiable. If you're accountable for them, it needs to be on your platform, because in the end, the customer, if something goes haywire, as you said, not going to care where it came from. But Microsoft's always been keen to capture the hearts of developers and engineers. And one thing is, as a testament to that, is our acquisition of GitHub a while ago, which is an open source management platform. That kind of shows that we are still very open to support that, because there's a lot of agility and innovation coming from open source as well. It's a question of choice. A lot of customers say, this is what I want. And of course, it's always a matter of explaining the value of your own platform and what it brings. One of the things I was thinking about as we're here in Europe is companies with workers' councils. Visibility controls and protectionism is really important to make sure you look at, if you have multiple components, who gets to see what. And this is not just the GDPR and privacy towards our customers, employees and partners as well. And this is one of the key things that we try, to have absolute watertight. It's just one aspect to think about with this, but still, open source does have, value, and we do support it with our GitHub. Yeah.
Great. So obviously a lot of different perspectives then on IP. Something that is very core, but at the same time, there are certain parts of IP that maybe take too long. On the other hand, I presume, or I know from some clients that IP is also a way of buying time and making sure that it takes longer for others to come into the market. You create disadvantages for others. It may be, to ensure a place at the table for important negotiations and so on. And then obviously we have this question about open source. So many different interesting challenges for IP moving forward. With this, I want to say thank you to our panelists, Victoria, Sven, and Anna. Very interesting discussion, great panel. And I also hope that all of you who have attended this event, that you are as happy with this session as I am. So with that, we are closing up and going over to a Q&A session. Thank you very much.